Me live is Alex Shephard from the New Republic in New York. Alex, thank you very much for joining us on Weekend Edition. Let's start with the devastating news. As we just heard from Cordelia Lynch, 630 people overnight have died as a result of COVID-19, making the total deaths in New York 3,556, the worst affected city in the US.
Yeah, it's the thing that you notice living in New York now is just the number of sirens. It's really astounding. They're almost nonstop wherever you are in the city. And, we may not have hit our peak yet, too. We'll see what the numbers are tomorrow. It does seem like things are possibly nearing that point. The governor has indicated that, but this is still a crisis situation, a sort of 9/11 in slow motion.
It certainly is. As you mentioned, Alex, the New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been talking about the apex. He named it the Battle of the Mountaintop, and he says that they're not ready for the apex, which is estimated to occur within 7 days. Alex, what is needed to prepare for this?
They've been trying to acquire supplies. I think over the last few weeks, the state has been doing what they can in terms of getting as many supplies and hospital beds as possible. But now we're in a situation where, first responders, doctors are getting sick. People are not coming in. The hospital system has been stretched to capacity already for days now. And the situation, still is not abating. The hospital ship, the Comfort, which was just mentioned, was brought in, but it's really been a mess implementing it. There were only 4 patients there 2 days ago, and now they've screwed up this transfer. So I think the next question is going to be personnel, but also if they can get these makeshift hospitals. One's in Central Park, one is in the Javits Center, as was just mentioned, up to speed.
Not to mention all of the ventilators and medical equipment, as you said, that is needed. There's also been some new medical guidelines advising Americans to wear cloth-style masks, preferably not the surgical ones. It's not a compulsory situation, and US President Donald Trump deciding not to wear one?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that, we've known is effective, but the government had sort of waffled on it because they didn't want people to be stockpiling these masks while they needed to get them to hospitals. We've reached a point where, I think most places have a stockpile to get them through the next several weeks. But this is, in some ways indicative of the administration, the federal government's entire approach here. They could have been acquiring these supplies in this 2-month window that they had when they were first aware of these cases in China. They didn't. They waited. And now, we're several weeks into this crisis in the country, and they're sort of finally letting up and, advising people to wear masks.
Unemployment stats in the US have exploded. 6.6 million filed for unemployment in the last week, making it over 10 million in 2 weeks. We are hearing reports that we haven't seen these numbers like this since the Great Depression, and it's going to get worse.
It's really staggering to look at a graph of the numbers, because you'll see peaks in the very, very small 60,000 100,000, and now we're at 4 million, 6 million, and as you said, it's going to get significantly worse. The state systems are already strained, and the federal response, with the stimulus, unemployment insurance was increased at the federal level, which will certainly help some people, but there's just not enough being done, particularly when you compare what the United States is doing to other developed countries.
And I heard this morning just some astonishing numbers of people lining up for food banks. Normally they receive about 50,000, but 8 million are certainly lining up. There's like 500 to 600 people in a line alone. It's just, it must just be absolutely devastating where you are.
It's the kind of thing that you thought could never happen again. These are images from the 1920s, or early 1930s, and the country. It's happened so quickly, just in 3 weeks, to have 10 million people lose jobs, but also several million lose their health care, because in this country, healthcare is usually tied to employment. So it's just creating all of these interlocking crises, both in terms of healthcare and the economy, that our existing systems are exacerbating because they're just not equipped to handle this.
How is the situation in terms of social distancing from what you're witnessing? We, for example, Alex, have just got some new measures, supermarket giants cracking down on our social distancing policies as of tomorrow, but certainly strict self-isolating social distancing rules. Are they, in general, adhering to these rules?
It's one of the most remarkable things. I think in New York, you associate the city with people always moving around, and it really is remarkable how few people are out. I mean, there are certainly lines outside grocery stores. There's one outside a bank today, but and you're seeing more and more people wearing masks, either homemade or purchased surgical masks around the streets when you see them at all. But for the most part, it's quite a different situation than it was 3 weeks ago when the parks were still full of people. At least in my neighborhood, I barely encounter anybody when I go on my morning jog.
It is so different, isn't it? And the amazing thing as well, the people are just really thinking outside of the square and becoming creative, making their own masks, and companies producing hand sanitizer and so forth. So we are seeing, a lot of positives to it. We haven't got too much longer, but I do want to mention the US President Donald Trump has fired a senior official, Michael Atkinson, who was first alerted Congress to a whistleblower complaint that led to his impeachment trial. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when the president was impeached that you heard particularly from Republican senators who were voting to acquit was that they thought that this was going to be a chastening experience for the president, that he would learn his lesson, and that he certainly wouldn't try to do something like this. Atkinson, of course, was the person who alerted Congress about the whistleblower complaint in the first place. And we're also hearing reports that more people in his position are likely to be forced out in this, very obviously political purge. The Congress itself is obviously focused on coronavirus right now, as is everyone else. This is the kind of thing that probably 8 weeks ago would have been a huge scandal, but right now it's really struggling for airtime.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, we really appreciate you coming on board today on Weekend Edition. Alex, you stay safe, and we'll talk to you again. Alex Shephard from the New Republic in New York.
Thank you.